Alright guys, this is your boy, Gachev. I believe the name is Bulgarian. You'll get used to my humor. Anyhow, I decided to do tutorials using SketchUp for perspective. And this is one way of doing it. There's a much simpler way of doing it that I'll show you in another tutorial. So basically here you can use SketchUp the way you want to. Like, there's no limit on what you can do. You can just throw in a few cubes and use them as a perspective grid, or you can go more in depth and actually model an entire city, or you can even like put texture and then do a realistic rendering, but that's not this tutorial. This tutorial is a bit more focused on painting. For this one I decided to record my whole entire process, meaning that most of the video is gonna be me painting small details, but in future videos I'm thinking of giving less importance to that part and more on the construction part. So yeah, basically we're going to be doing a matte painting, and here I'm just modeling the city so that I have my correct perspective. Alright, so basically there are plenty of beginner tutorials on SketchUp on how to use the basic functions, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy, pretty smooth. You can model all kinds of shapes. Here, the only thing I knew before starting the project is that I wanted like this a street with merchants in maybe a Victorian era, cowboy era, a bit of a mix of all that. So yeah, here I'm throwing a bunch of houses. So basically it's the push and pull technique on SketchUp. It's pretty easy to do. You guys are gonna let me know if there's anything that you would want me to go in more detail and more depth in future tutorials. And then at some point you could even choose the subject matter. That could be a fun thing to do. They're basically just drawing lines and pushing and pulling shapes on the surfaces to create shapes. Pretty straightforward. You set up your view. You try to aim it for a good composition in your view. Try to fill the whole screen. Have some dynamic lines that go across the whole composition. Here I went a bit too much into details that are not visible from the shot, but it was a fun exercise in design. That's the cool thing about SketchUp. It takes no time and you can like build a city basically. Alright, so here I'm creating a street with stores. In future tutorials I'm going to show you exactly how to put texture and how to make a realistic rendering of that texture. So here I did this so that I can have that screen cap. When I import it on Photoshop, I place it on my canvas. Alright, here that's the golden ratio, and basically I'm trying to have either my vanishing point or a big dividing line be at a third of the composition. So once that's done, I just simply paint over it. Alright, I'm trying to have like a unified color on top of the whole thing and progressively block out areas. The further things are in the distance, the less contrasted they are, so that's something that I'm trying to take into account in this step before worrying about color, or design or anything. I'm just blocking out my shapes, and once again I had absolutely no clue what I was doing. So in SketchUp I was looking at a cube, and it started inspiring me on how I can push it and pull it so that it becomes a street. And once I have the street, well, then it inspires me of what I can put where, what type of characters, what kind of action is taking place. I mean, like, that's one way of doing it. So that's why I'm drawing out shapes in people to kind of understand where my own drawing is going. And here at this stage, what's very important is to separate the sky from the city. Basically, the foreground, middle ground, background, you want to separate those through the use of values. And that's what I'm doing at this stage. Some small details, making sure that the reflection of the asphalt is about the same value as the sky. Putting a lamp there. And now I'm just drawing some highlights on my characters. I'm not really too sure what they're doing. And this is sped up 2,000 times, this particular sequence, 2 times the original rate, so it can kind of give you an idea of how fast things are going. And of course, if there's a specific part that you would like to learn more about, well, I could do a separate video with more emphasis on that part and have it like twice the acceleration or normal speed. So here I'm just putting some texture. The whole texture thing is so that my paintbrush can grab onto, my eyedropper tool can grab onto some color. It's just not, instead of like choosing the color picker, sorry, the color from the swatches, I choose the eyedropper. This way it gives me a whole bunch of colors that are approximately the same in value, very close in hue. So now that I've blocked my characters out, I realize that there's a really important step, which is to have their anatomy correct. And the best way to do that is through line drawing. So basically I'm drawing the anatomy of my characters, and the best way to do that is to have it rough on one layer, then you make that layer less, you diminish the opacity of that layer, and then you do it again on the new layer more precisely and more precisely and more precisely. Basically you get the point until you've drawn enough info to better understand the anatomy of the character to paint on top of it. For this I didn't use any reference, and I sometimes do use reference. There's no shame in using reference, because I mean, you can spend a gazillion hours working on a painting, but if your anatomy is crooked, well, yeah, it's a bad painting. So here I'm drawing a kid with a soccer ball, just trying to have some scenery. Obviously, like, I didn't really take this painting very seriously. I wanted to paint something for the tutorial. I wanted to make something cheerful so that you guys think I'm cheerful. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, I like characters. I mean, I like face expressions, situations. I like to imagine things. Yeah. Yeah, trying to give her a nice body. That's a harlot on the street. I mean, I just figured, oh, there's a street corner, and it's back in the days. So what can I put there? And there you have it. And here there's a few folks enjoying a beer. But basically here you can see how I draw an oval for the head, put across to where the middle of the face and the eye line is. Then I draw a vertical line from that to the center of gravity on the floor, the projection of the center of gravity, so that my character is straight, the spline. I'm gonna block out the body with a few geometric shapes, and pretty much that's how I draw my characters. I mean, you can get into a lot more sophistication, meaning that I could be designing their clothes and everything. But on this one, I wanted to focus more on the technique rather than the design. I mean, I'm already designing a cityscape from back in the days, so yeah, I could have gone crazy on the armor design, but I figured that I'm already putting too many characters in that painting, and all of them have their all distinctive personalities. So if I went crazy in the design of each character, then it would be too much to take for a painting when you look at it. So yeah, basically that line that runs across the middle, that's the horizon line. Everybody's eyes, well, that's the level that your eyes would be at if you were inside the scene. So basically, a person in the scene that their eyes are on that line, they are as tall as you are. Kind of gives you a bit of a reference to situate yourself in space. And once again, for the horse, it would have been really good to use some anatomy pictures to look at how horses are made. But I've drawn a few horses and it's far away enough, so can I go? So basically here I'm just putting some colors just to have like a base color underneath. Now obviously there's no such thing as skin color, because skin in itself, it has all kinds of hues in it. Like there's yellow, red, blue, and there's alright, so yeah, here you can see trying to create the anatomy. I mean, I already have the base construction, so that gives me an idea of where the lines go. So I'm trying to have her hips bigger than, larger than her shoulders in width, and like drawing a few lines along the center so that I can get a better sense of volume. Then I started painting a bit of details on the clothes so that it looks like there's detail, but there's no detail. So yeah, that's something I'm trying to get better at. Instead of painting in the detail, just kind of suggest that there is detail with the brush or with texture, with like small bits of paint splatters, digital paint splatters, whatever you call it, just to like bake in the idea of detail. Because otherwise you'll never see the end of it, and there's no point in having everything super detailed. So basically having a bit of an X to like kind of give you an idea of where the center is. It's what I use for the head, just to have a better idea of how things are oriented. And pretty much the thing draws itself. I mean, the more I look at it, the more I understand it, the more I bring it to life. So basically, like, the artist is just a dude who sees potential in something, and kind of like that something gives birth to itself through that person. Whatever. So yeah, I keep on painting little details. I figured for compositional purposes it would be good to have some flowers over there, like something in the corners, so that when your eye wanders to the corner, it kind of stops it from going outside the canvas. Because the whole purpose of a composition, a well done composition, what it does is that it circles your eye around through the various elements of the composition, and it's what you do with perspective lines, it's what you do with light direction, it's what you do with characters who are pointing, I mean characters who are looking at places. That's how you orient the eye of the person, of the viewer. And your aim is the circle composition. So basically I started painting with more detail into the color. I'm not worrying too much about color harmony at this point, because later on I do a color balance and hue saturation. I mean, I go through each different color and I adjust it in hue saturation and luminosity. But still, like, I want to have like a general idea of what the colors are in those specific places, and it's also the base colors, so I try to get it as good as I can in hue. So basically, the thing about light is that everything is either receives direct light, because this is a direct sunlight, so basically every surface is either facing the sun or not, so it's either bright or dark, and the line in between those is pretty sharp due to the fact that it's direct spotlight to the sun, versus I forgot the term, but versus a cloudy sky, versus a diffuse light. That's the difference between the two. And yeah, like here, that's an old guy who's very small. I mean, at first you thought it was a kid, but nah, it was an old man. Yeah, there's a horsey, then the horsey's too big. Oh, yeah, the horsey's too big. I made it smaller. And here I wanted to have a brown for his jacket and a brown for the horse, but they can't be the same brown because there's so much distance between them. So him, since he's much closer than the horse to us, his colors will be more saturated and he will have greater contrast, and also greater contrast between the light, the bright color, and the shadow color. Like, same with those characters who are also relatively in the foreground compared to other characters like these guys who are a bit further, and this guy is in the shade. Alright, so a trick that I realized for the shades is picking the base color, then adding the complementary value on it with a very bright opacity until it gives you the perfect hue that you want to use for your shadow color. And then for you go the opposite direction, then the opposite color a little bit, or like the sun, or basically the light source color that you use, that's the color that you will have in your bright areas. And ideally you want to do a bit of a color balancing thing and use a complementary hue, a bit of it, in the shadow areas. Whoa, that didn't make sense entirely, but you get what I'm saying. Like here, there's a bit of a violet on her skin tone in the shadow areas. That gives it a bit more realism, just with the color palette. And yeah, there was a point where I wasn't doing that, and the point I started doing that, and then I see a difference. And basically, that's pretty much how development is made in any field you want to develop into. So yeah, here I'm polishing a bit details. Like you see that there's the bug line on her hip, on her thigh there. Yeah, there's a place where that separates the bright from the dark area, and that line specifically, it's called a line because it's usually visible as a line. It's the darkest spot on your subject. So basically, before that, there's the direct light hitting it, and on the other end of that, there's the reflection of the environment lighting. So I decided to give it a bit some more funky colors in the sky, and the reason that the clouds are shaped in that way is so that they bring your eye towards the center of the image when your eye gravitates towards the top. So here I'm bashing some photo textures because yeah, imagine painting the whole asphalt, all the tiles hand by hand. Oh, my Photoshop freeze, so I decided to play chess until it freezes. And yeah, play 2 games. All right. So yeah, it bugs my Photoshop when I do the perspective warp thing and I'm recording the video. So yeah, here I'm just putting some tiles, give it a bit of texture. Like actually the one where the bar is pretty good. I'm gonna keep it like that. Just playing with the opacity with blending modes, trying to blend the textures in after they're the right perspective. Put a gargoyle there just because her hand is pointing there, so then your eye is gonna follow it and it's gonna end up there. So just to give it some nice little detail there. Right, so I'm giving her more details. Now I'm adding in the shadows of everything because the characters kind of look weird. All the little details in the elements that will be given importance to. Obviously, the scene between this harlot and this very surprised guy who receives attention, and he's very shocked that yeah, basically they're the focus on this painting, and all the focus is going to be on them. So naturally, you want to give them more detail than the rest of the painting. And in the case of using photo textures, well, there's actually a bit too much detail inside the photo texture. At some point, you're gonna see me destroying detail from the photo texture because otherwise it's too detailed and it draws your eyes to where the detail is. And I mean, I don't want your eyes to go on the asphalt or the brick wall. I want your eyes to go to the main event, and also to look at it as a whole scenery and have your eyes floating here and there and looking at the little parts of the painting. So I mean, that's how I intend the viewer to contemplate it. I mean, you can do whatever you want. So here yeah, I wanted to put some photo texture in the background just to build building that resembles a bit what I'm going to show you in my future tutorials. Right here I'm using that light render tool just to give it some light. I figured out that a better way would be to draw in the shape with the lasso tool, and just that little ray of light, I mean, I've witnessed it in the park how a ray of light gave a whole different light to the setting. I mean, it makes it more lively, it gives it realism. So here I draw in a poster for that pawn shop, weapons, magic, whatever you name it. The guy will argue with it for it. Yeah, we're arguing. Now, obviously, there is some Skyrim inspiration. I'm not gonna lie to you, that game is pretty cool. But this is just in a more random, less serious setting. Like, this little guy is like, "Hey, have you done? Do you got what we need?" And the seller is like, "Man." Alright. So, here what I'm actually doing is that in order to do this, I merged all the layers onto a copy layer of my painting. So here I'm rendering a light effect from the top end corner where my sun is at, and I'm trying to like balance it with the colors and the ambient color so that there's warm in the sun and there in the brightness, and there is cool colors in the shadow areas. Once I do that, I create a mask and I show the previous layer. This way I get to have a mix of both the effect and underneath the effect. Now here I'm doing the same thing but with a different concept. I'm desaturating, offsetting, blurring, so that I'm basically destroying the image. I'm destroying the bits that I don't want to have that much attention. And with a mask layer, I'm making a see-through of what's important, like my selling point of the painting, which is these two characters in front. And then I'm playing with the curves, with the opacities. So basically, the little boy and everything all around looks less saturated, so that it gives it a more realistic effect. Basically, when you're taking a picture, the camera focuses on a certain element, and all the rest is a little faded and blurry and less saturated. Same thing as when you're looking with your rear eyes. I mean, you can't pay attention to the whole environment at the same time and everything that's going on. And that's a problem that I had, and I'm sure most of you had, trying to paint in all the details because they're there. But like I said, I'm trying to suggest and hint details instead of actually painting them in. And like you can see the inside of the store, that's pretty much all I've done. I mean, nothing there is drawn. And here the little boy there, I'm blurring his feet because they're in motion. He's playing soccer, shaking a ball, whatever, walking around. And here I'm cutting out the parts of my illuminated layer that I don't want to have illuminated. Basically, I want to show the underneath layer because this part is not facing the sun, but Photoshop doesn't understand that because it's 2D. Right, so yep, that's pretty much it, zooming in and out. Another important thing is that I was flipping the canvas horizontally. This allows me to make sure that my composition is balanced, because sometimes you get the tendency of having everything towards one side or towards the other side. Yeah, alright, so I figured that that gargoyle there, I wanted to have it more pop up a bit more, kind of like create a cool contrast with the wall behind it. And that's it. Alright, thanks you guys. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys in another tutorial. Take care. GatchevArt.